World War II has a treasure trove of stories about brave fighters laying down their lives to protect the country they love. However, while such examples continue to shine, ugly stories about betrayal continue to exist in the shadows, and one such story comes from Norway. Hello and welcome to our channel. Today, we're going to talk about the history of Vidkun Quisling and the role that man had to play in the Second World War. Vidkun Abram Lauritz Johnson Quisling entered the world on July 18, 1887 in the town of Fyresdal in southern Norway. John Lauritz Quisling and Anna Caroline Bang were his parents. His paternal grandfather was a Lutheran priest and his father was a genealogist. His mother belonged to a prosperous Grimstad family. When Quisling was a freshman in high school, he decided to enroll in War College. The entry exams were famously demanding, and he had aced them with the highest score of all 250 cadets. The War College prepared Quisling for a career in the military, and he enrolled at the Military Academy to continue his training. Quisling earned the highest GPA of any academy graduate since its inception in 1817. His efforts were rewarded when King Harald V of Norway granted an audience to the young Quisling. The Norwegian Army General Staff welcomed Quisling in 1911. After that, for the next 18 years, he spent a lot of time away from home on various diplomatic and aid missions. There were several countries where Quisling had made his home. However, Quisling's political views were most influenced by his time spent in Russia for 5 years. The term Universism, which Quisling had stolen from the Dutch academic J.J.M. de Groot because the name of Quisling's political philosophy. Quisling, in a manuscript of 700-plus pages, sought to reconcile Christian philosophy with modern physics into a new universal religion that would explain everything in the universe. As a means of achieving global oneness, Universalism was also an approach advocated. The purpose was to build a universal consciousness by spreading awareness from person to family to country. At some point, Universism became racially charged when Quisling infused a belief in Nordic racial supremacy into the ideology. He argued that the Jews were standing in the way of a global unification that could only be attained with Nordic leadership. In 1929, Quisling settled back down in his native Norway. As a member of the Agrarian Party, he held the position of Norwegian Minister of Defense from 1931 until 1933. After being denied the position of party leader by the Agrarian Party, Quisling resigned and started his own political organization. As a political activist, he helped establish the Nasjonal Samling, National Unity Party, in May of 1933. Quisling also took up the role of Frere, or party leader. In an article published in 1930 to honor Nansen's life, Quisling made clear his support for corporate structures, religious dogma, and elite authority. In addition, he praised the Nordic race. The small group known as the Nordic Folk Awakening was established in 1930, and it can be considered a precursor to the larger Nasjonal Samling, the NS. A number of prominent people, including landowners, lawyers, academics, and the president of the Industrial League, joined. Quisling was given the authority to function independently as the executive committee. This marked the first time in history that the concept of a Führer in fascist systems was adopted anywhere in the world, and it happened in Norway. A major focus of Quisling's stint as defense minister in the Farmers' Party cabinet from 1931 to 1933 was on countering the labor movement. Strikers were harshly punished, and he blamed the Labor Party for working with the Soviet Union. After several turbulent years in office, Quisling had established himself as a prominent politician. While he was successful in 1933 when he created the NS, the party's dismal showing of 2.2% in the election was a letdown. Brown uniforms, the Nazi salute, a pro-German foreign policy, Quisling's unchecked control, and antisemitism were all implemented the following year, further solidifying NS's fascist character. It was claimed that the 1,700 Jews living in Norway posed a danger to the indigenous people of the region. The local elections in 1934 and the parliamentary elections in 1936 were particularly glaring failures for Quisling. When NS's primary political political adversaries, the Labour Party, joined forces with the Farmers' Party in 1935, the province became politically irrelevant. A majority of the party's brilliant members refused to accept Quisling's poor leadership, and the party quickly dissolved after the election. But he clung to his role as party leader like glue, and he was implacable in his refusal to consider alternatives. In response, his detractors either left the party or were ousted from it. This left NS in the years preceding the German invasion as a tiny political group of a few hundred active, genuine believers who accepted Quisling without question. His anti-Semitism worsened throughout this time. Even though he initially took it up because of Hitler's popularity, his hatred for Jews eventually became an intrinsic part of his personality. He gave a series of anti-Semitic lectures in 1938 and 1939, during which time petitions were signed opposing the admission of Jewish refugees from Germany. In addition, he pushed for a return to the pre-1851 constitutional provision that had banned Jews from Norway. As controversial as he already was, his fanaticism made him even more so in the eyes of many Norwegians. Contrarily, the party faithful shared his anti-Semitism. Furthermore, remember that NS was no ordinary political party even before the German occupation. The party's Frere leader had unquestionable authority, and his commands were to be followed without question because of the Führerprinzip, the leader principle, or in German the Führerprinzip. Once the openly opposed members of NS were purged by Quisling in 1936 to 1937, he faced no major challenges to his leadership of the party for the rest of its life. But still, Quisling was an outcast radical with a little following right up until the German conquest in 1940. When Germany invaded Poland in 1939, Norway and the rest of Scandinavia took on a new strategic significance for the Axis powers. Germany's naval chief from 1939 to 1943, Erich Raeder, was anxious about the safety of the country's naval stations in Norway, from which the country could reach the North Sea and the Atlantic Ocean. After meeting with Quisling in December of 1939, Raeder brought Hitler in for a meeting. According to Quisling, the British were plotting to invade Norway for strategic reasons. Germany's invasion of Denmark and Norway, codenamed Operation Weserübung, had been planned for some time. On April 9, 1940, German forces led by General Niklaus von Falkenhorst invaded Norway. When the German attack began, Quisling tried to stage the first coup d'etat over radio in Norway. He declared that the Norwegian people should accept the oncoming Germans with open arms. Along with his declaration of leadership, he also introduced a new administration. Quisling made the same radio statement again 2 hours later. The next government would face the most serious consequences for the persons affected if they did not assist, he said. 6 days was all that Quisling's coup lasted. He resigned from his position on April 15, 1940, at the behest of the Nazi Party's leadership. As a result of King Haakon VII's refusal to accept a Quisling administration, Germany continued its invasion of Norway. On June 19, 1940, Norway surrendered to Nazi Germany. After Johan Nygaardsvold resigned as prime minister, the monarch and his family fled to London. It was in December of 1939 that Hitler met Quisling, and he was rather taken with him. Norway was tentatively assigned to Quisling's command in the original German occupation preparations. The Nazi hierarchy, however, quickly understood that Quisling had little support among the general public. The Gauleiter, district head of Essen, Josef Terboven, was promoted to Reichskommissar by Hitler on April 24, 1940. The military was still under von Falkenhorst's command. Besides Nationalsamling, all other political parties were banned. The job of cabinet head was offered to Quisling as leader of the Nationalsamling by Terboven. Ministerpräsident, Prime Minister of the Nationalregierung, national government, a German puppet state, was a position Terboven appointed him to in early 1942. The so-called Jewish clause of the Norwegian constitution was one of Quisling's first acts in this position. This clause, which was repealed in 1851, had previously barred Jewish immigration to Norway. In a series of legislation enacted between October and November of 1942, Quisling authorized the arrest of all male Jews in Norway, the seizure of all Jewish-owned property and assets, and the registration of all Jews in Norway. Just over 2,100 Jews called Norway home at the time of the Nazi invasion. Nearly 350 German and Austrian Jews who had fled Nazism were among them. Nazi officers in Norway, working with the Nationalsamling, began rounding up women and children a month after the mass arrest of Jewish men. Following pre-arranged preparations, police in Norway rounded up Jewish Norwegians and transported them them to Oslo for deportation to Germany. On November 26, 1942, the first group of 532 Jews was deported from Oslo. On February 25, 1943, 158 more people were deported. This was followed by the transfer of smaller groups. As many as 772 Norwegian Jews were sent to Germany by deportation from Oslo. Ships carrying Norwegian Jews sailed from Oslo to the German city of Stettin, today's Szczecin in Poland. After that, they were shipped off to Auschwitz via rail. The vast majority were murdered by gas shortly after their arrival in Auschwitz. Yet, despite the odds, 34 Jewish Norwegian men made it to the war's end. Thanks to Norwegian police and underground members, many Jews were warned in advance of the roundups. Around 1,000 Jews from Norway fled to neutral Sweden with the help of the underground. Others, fearing discovery, retreated into the shadows. The church, the teachers, and other professional and industrial institutions in Norway fought hard against Quisling's attempts to Nazify Norwegian society. Later on, there was sabotage and the shooting of informants. In 1943, the number of NS members increased to 43,000, much beyond the 50,000 targets. Terboven was Quisling's lifeline. With his help, young Norwegians were enlisted in the Eastern Front and Norwegian Jews were deported. After the German surrender in May 1945, Quisling believed he would be able to negotiate with the resistance despite his widespread unpopularity. After Europe's VE Day celebrations on May 8, 1945, Quisling and his cabinet members surrendered the next day. In the summer, he was indicted on multiple accounts, including conspiracy with Hitler to invade and occupy Norway. The trial occurred in Oslo, Norway, around the start of the fall of 1945. A lot of people heard about it, and the media paid close attention to it. Quisling had a team of defense attorneys at his side during the trial, but he did not dispute the allegations against him. He claimed that he had been acting in Norway's best interests and that he had never planned to betray his country. On September 10th, a decision was reached. Almost every claim leveled against Quisling was upheld as true. In accordance with his death sentence, he was put to death on October 24, 1945, at the Akershus fortress in Oslo. Almost 20 years later, a Norwegian psychiatry professor named Gabriel Langfeldt would write, "They fulfilled the standard description of the paranoid megalomaniac more exactly than any other case I have encountered." This was in reference to Quisling's aspirations. So that is all the time we had today, folks. Hope you enjoyed the video. Do not forget to subscribe to our channel and do hit the bell icon on your way out. See you all next time, folks.